Jake Turner, a seasoned Navy SEAL, had always thrived in the unknown. The harsh, unforgiving mountain ranges where he trained were second nature to him. Each jagged peak a challenge to be conquered, each narrow trail a test of endurance. On this particular mission, however, the usual rhythm of his routine training was disrupted by an unexpected storm that rolled in with little warning, turning the once clear sky into a roiling canvas of gray clouds and sharp gusts. Visibility dropped, the wind howled through the pines, and the steady patter of rain quickly morphed into a relentless downpour. Before we dive into today's incredible story, make sure to like and subscribe. And I'm curious, what's your favorite adventure you've ever had in nature? Share it with me in the comments. Despite the worsening conditions, Jake pressed forward, relying on his instincts and the GPS device strapped to his wrist. But as the storm intensified, the device flickered, then died, leaving him blind to the path ahead. The familiar trails he'd memorized became obscured under the sheets of rain, the landscape shifting from friend to foe. His breathing steady, Jake adjusted his pack and scanned the dense forest around him, searching for any sign of shelter or a safe route back. At his side, Ranger, his loyal Belgian Malinois and trusted military dog, moved with deliberate purpose. The dog's ears twitched, alert to every snap of a twig and rustle of leaves. Suddenly, Ranger stopped, muscles tensing as he lifted his nose to the wind. Without hesitation, the dog turned sharply and began leading Jake off the beaten path, into the thick underbrush. Jake frowned, glancing at the direction Ranger was pulling him. It was a risky move, veering away from the known trails during a storm. But he trusted Ranger's instincts implicitly. As they pushed deeper into the wilderness, the rain softened to a drizzle, the storm's fury retreating just enough to reveal the muted greens and browns of the forest floor. Jake's boots sank slightly into the damp earth with each step, the air thick with the scent of wet pine and moss. Ranger's pace remained steady, his nose close to the ground, guiding Jake through a maze of foliage and fallen branches. After several minutes, the dog suddenly froze, his eyes fixed on something ahead. Jake followed Ranger's gaze and spotted faint, unnatural shapes partially concealed by the trees. Metal structures, angular and stark against the organic chaos of the forest. They were camouflaged expertly, painted in dull greens and browns to blend with the environment. But to Jake's trained eye, they screamed out of place. His heart quickened. This was no ordinary training ground or abandoned outpost. The signs pointed to something far more secretive, something hidden deliberately from prying eyes. With cautious steps, Jake approached the edge of the clearing where the structure stood. The storm had passed, leaving behind a heavy silence, broken only by the distant call of a crow. He crouched low, scanning the area. A series of antennas and satellite dishes jutted into the sky, their surfaces slick with rain. Nearby, a cluster of camouflaged tents and a few vehicles, military-grade but unmarked, were parked in neat rows. Smoke curled faintly from a chimney, hinting at recent activity. Jake's mind raced. This base was not on any official maps he had access to, nor had he ever heard of it during his deployments. The implications were troubling. Was this a rogue operation? An unauthorized weapons development site? The possibilities were as dangerous as they were unclear. Ranger's low growl brought Jake back to the present. The dog's muscles were coiled, eyes sharp and scanning the perimeter. Suddenly, a figure emerged briefly from behind one of the tents. A guard in tactical gear, weapons slung casually but ready. The guard's expression was stern, and his eyes flicked directly toward Jake's hiding spot. For a fraction of a second, their gazes locked, and then the guard disappeared inside the tent. Jake knew he had been spotted, but there was no time to retreat without raising further alarm. He melted back into the trees, signaling Ranger to follow silently. The dog obeyed instantly, their synchronized movements reflecting years of training and mutual trust. As they slipped away, Jake's mind was already formulating his next move. This base was a threat, and he needed to gather as much information as possible without getting caught. Back in the shadowed cover of the forest, Jake pulled out a compact binocular device, peering once more at the perimeter. Armed guards patrolled in pairs, their movements methodical but vigilant. Communications equipment blinked intermittently, sending encrypted signals Jake couldn't yet intercept. He spotted cameras mounted on trees and towers, their lenses swiveling slowly, scanning the surrounding area for intruders. Ranger's ears perked up again, and the dog padded silently ahead, nose low to the ground. He stopped suddenly, pawing at a patch of disturbed earth near a fallen log. Jake knelt down to inspect it, a hidden tripwire, cleverly concealed beneath leaves and debris. Had he stepped on it? No. Ranger's keen senses had detected it first, alerting Jake to the danger. The realization hit hard. This base was heavily guarded, designed to keep unauthorized personnel out at all costs. But Jake's training kicked in. He was no stranger to evasion and survival in hostile environments. With Ranger by his side, he had the best partner imaginable. Keen senses, unwavering loyalty, and an unbreakable bond forged in countless missions under fire. As the storm clouds finally began to dissipate, a sliver of sunlight pierced through the canopy, illuminating the rugged terrain and the hidden threat nestled within it. Jake's jaw tightened. This was just the beginning. The mountain range, once a familiar training ground, had revealed a secret that could shake the foundations of everything he believed in. With steady resolve, Jake adjusted his pack, signaling Ranger to move forward. The dog responded immediately, leading the way deeper into the wilderness, their silhouettes blending into the misty morning as they prepared to uncover the truth behind the clandestine base. The stakes were high, but for Jake Turner, survival and mission success were never just options. They were imperatives. As they disappeared into the dense forest, the quiet hum of encrypted radios and the distant footsteps of guards echoed faintly behind them, a reminder that danger lurked just beyond the trees. But Jake's focus remained unshaken. Guided by Ranger's instincts and his own seasoned experience, he was ready to navigate the treacherous path ahead, determined to expose what lay hidden beneath the surface of these remote mountains. Jake Turner's breath came slow and steady as he navigated the dense forest, every sense alert to the subtle shifts in the environment. The storm had passed, but the damp earth beneath his boots still clung stubbornly, each step muffled by a carpet of moss and fallen needles. Beside him, Ranger moved with the precision of a seasoned scout, his sharp eyes and twitching nose scanning the underbrush with an intensity born of years of training. The bond between them was unspoken yet unbreakable, a partnership forged in countless missions where survival depended on trust and instinct. Jake had been a Navy SEAL for nearly a decade, a career defined by high-stakes operations and relentless discipline. But it was Ranger who had become more than just a military working dog. He was a partner, a guardian, and a guide through the chaos of hostile terrain. Their connection was palpable, a silent dialogue of glances and gestures that allowed them to move as one through the wilderness. As they pressed deeper into the forest, Jake's mind replayed the discovery of the hidden base, the camouflage structures, the unmarked vehicles, the armed guards. Everything pointed to a secret operation that defied official channels. The implications were chilling. A rogue military installation, hidden from maps and oversight, suggested unauthorized actions that could have far-reaching consequences. Ranger suddenly halted, his body rigid as he sniffed the air. Jake crouched low, following the dog's lead. Ahead, nestled among towering pines, was a narrow, barely visible trail. It wasn't marked on any of Jake's maps, but the worn ground suggested regular use. Ranger stepped cautiously onto the path, signaling Jake to follow. The trail wound upward, weaving through thick clusters of fir and spruce. Patches of sunlight filtered through the canopy, casting dappled shadows that danced with the breeze. Jake's eyes scanned constantly, noting the faint footprints pressed into the soft earth. Boots, heavy and purposeful. This was a route used by the base's personnel, lifeline threading through the mountain's secret heart. As they moved silently, Jake's ears caught the faint hum of machinery. He paused, listening intently. The sound grew clearer, a low rhythmic thrum accompanied by the occasional metallic clang. Ranger's ears twitched. The dog's instincts told him this was no ordinary facility. They skirted a ridge and found themselves overlooking a secluded clearing where the source of the noise became visible. A series of sleek, metallic containers lined the perimeter, connected by a web of cables and pipes. Nearby, figures in tactical gear moved with purpose, their faces obscured by helmets and visors. The base's activity was more extensive than Jake had first imagined. Heavy equipment and vehicles were stationed strategically, some bearing emblems that had been carefully removed or painted over. Jake crouched behind a fallen log, raising his compact binoculars to his eyes. He observed a group gathered around a large device that resembled a mobile weapons platform. Sleek, dangerous, and clearly experimental. Men exchanged coded phrases through earpieces, their conversations clipped and professional. The air buzzed with tension, as if every movement was a calculated step in a larger plan. Ranger pressed gently against Jake's leg, grounding him in the moment. Trusting the dog's instincts, Jake scanned the area for vulnerabilities. Security cameras rotated slowly on high poles, their lenses glinting in the fading light. Patrols moved in predictable patterns, but Ranger's keen senses detected subtle irregularities. Gaps in coverage, blind spots created by the terrain. Jake's mind shifted gears. This was more than reconnaissance. It was a puzzle to be solved. Each detail mattered, the technology being developed, the personnel involved, the base's communication methods. He had to gather intelligence without alerting the guards. A challenge that required patience, precision, and the unique advantage of his canine partner. As dusk settled, Jake and Ranger slipped further into the shadows, following a narrow drainage ditch that ran alongside the base's perimeter. The ditch's rocky bed allowed them to move quietly, avoiding the crunch of twigs and dry leaves. Ranger's nose twitched as he detected faint chemical odors, a mix of industrial solvents and something unfamiliar, perhaps a new compound or material in development. Jake took mental notes, committing every observation to memory. The base was a hive of clandestine activity, a place where secrets were guarded fiercely and technology pushed beyond legal boundaries. His heart tightened with the weight of the discovery. Exposing this operation could prevent untold harm, but it also meant walking a razor-thin line between success and capture. A sudden rustle in the bushes made Jake freeze. Ranger's hackles rose instantly, and the dog growled low in his throat. From the shadows emerged a figure, a young man in fatigues, his face drawn and wary. Jake's pulse quickened. Was this an enemy guard, or someone else trapped within the base's web? The man's eyes flicked nervously between Jake and Ranger. "Wait," he whispered urgently. "You're not with him, are you?" Jake lowered his binoculars slowly, signaling Ranger to stay calm. No, he replied quietly. Who are you? The man hesitated, then stepped closer, glancing over his shoulder as if fearing pursuit. Name's Carter. I'm part of the support crew here, but I didn't sign up for what's happening. They're developing weapons that shouldn't exist. Stuff that could start wars, not end them. Jake's mind raced. An insider meant access, but also danger. Why are you talking to me? He asked cautiously. Because I want out, Carter said, his voice barely above a whisper. And I need someone who can get the truth out there. The higher-ups have gone dark on communication. If they catch me, I'm done for. Ranger moved forward, nudging Carter's hand with his nose, a silent gesture of trust. Jake studied the man's face. The fear, the desperation, the flicker of hope. This was no ordinary defector. He was a man trapped between loyalty and conscience. Jake nodded slowly. I'm listening, but we have to be careful. One wrong move and this place will swallow us whole. Together, they slipped back into the shadows, a fragile alliance forming in the heart of the mountain's secretive maze. The base's true purpose was beginning to unravel, piece by piece, through the eyes of a seasoned SEAL, his loyal dog, and a disillusioned insider risking everything to expose the dark underbelly of power. The night had settled deep over the mountain range, cloaking the forest in shadows so thick that even the moonlight struggled to pierce through the canopy. Jake Turner crouched low behind a cluster of dense bushes, his breath steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. Beside him, Ranger lay silent, ears perked and eyes scanning the darkness. The young man who had introduced himself as Carter pressed close, his movements cautious but deliberate. There was no room for mistakes. Every second could mean discovery or death. Jake's mind raced as he pieced together what Carter had revealed. The clandestine base was not just a hidden outpost, but a hub for unauthorized operations involving advanced weaponry. The guards were alert, the surveillance tight, and the communications encrypted. Any attempt at direct contact with command had been thwarted by jamming signals emanating from the base itself. This was a rogue operation, shielded from oversight and dripping with danger. Carter's voice was a whisper as he outlined the layout he had memorized during his time in support. The base is divided into 3 main sectors, he said, his eyes darting nervously. Command center, weapons development labs, and the living quarters. The command center is heavily fortified, but the labs are less guarded during shift changes. That's our best chance to get inside. Jake nodded, appreciating the insider knowledge. And communications? Encrypted, but they use a relay system through that tower near the ridge, Carter explained. If we can get close enough, maybe we can intercept or disrupt their signals long enough to send a message. Jake studied the terrain silently. The base was carefully camouflaged, but the repeated patrols and shifting guard rotations hinted at exploitable patterns. Ranger shifted beside him, nose twitching as he caught scents carried on the cool night air. Scent trails of men and machines, faint but persistent. Suddenly, a distant bark echoed through the trees. Jake's heart jumped. Ranger's ears flattened as the dog growled low, muscles tensing. From the shadows emerged 2 armed guards, their flashlights sweeping methodically across the forest floor. They were close. Too close. Jake pressed Carter down into the underbrush, signaling him to stay absolutely still. Ranger melted into the darkness, his body low and silent like a shadow. The guards' footsteps crunched nearer, their voices low but clear. "Did you see anything?" one asked, his flashlight beam slicing through the foliage. "Nothing but a couple of deer," the other replied, eyes narrowing, senses sharpened by the possibility of intrusion. "Keep moving. We don't want any surprises." The guards passed within feet of their hiding spot, the beams of their flashlights narrowly missing the trio. Jake's pulse hammered in his ears, but he remained still, muscles coiled. Once the footsteps faded, he exhaled slowly, signaling Carter to rise. "We can't stay here," Jake whispered. "We need to move closer to the base, but quietly. Ranger, lead." The dog rose, sleek and silent, and took a point as they navigated the uneven ground. The forest was a maze of roots and rocks, each step a calculated risk. Jake admired Ranger's agility and instinct. The dog moved with an uncanny blend of grace and purpose, senses attuned to every vibration. Minutes later, they reached a vantage point overlooking the base's perimeter. The glow of floodlights cast long shadows, illuminating the guards who patrolled in pairs. Jake's eyes caught the rhythm of their patrols, a predictable cadence with brief pauses near the entrances. Between the guards, Jake spotted a narrow service gate, secured but potentially accessible. Carter pointed toward the gate. "Shift change happens in 15 minutes. The gate is manually operated during that time, which means the electronic lock is disabled briefly." Jake's lips curled into a grim smile. Perfect window. They retreated a few hundred yards to a thicket where they could prepare. Jake pulled a compact toolkit from his pack, lockpicks, a small jammer, and a device to intercept radio frequencies. Ranger settled beside him, eyes gleaming in the darkness. Jake whispered to Carter, "You stay here and keep a watch. If anything goes wrong, you run for the ridge and signal me with the flare. Got it?" Carter nodded, swallowing hard but resolute. Jake moved toward the gate, slipping through the shadows like a ghost. His training took over, silent, precise, every movement deliberate. He approached the gate's locking mechanism, kneeling to work the lockpicks. His fingers worked quickly, the tumblers clicking open as the timer ticked down. The gate swung open with a muted creak. Jake slipped inside, Ranger at his heels. The dog's nose twitched, picking up the scent of machinery and human activity. They moved swiftly along the perimeter, avoiding floodlights and security cameras. Ranger paused, growling softly. A patrol was approaching from the east. Jake pressed against the cold metal wall of a storage container, heart pounding as the guards passed mere feet away. They spoke in low voices, their words indistinct, but their presence a stark reminder of the danger encircling them. Once the patrol moved on, Jake signaled Ranger forward. They reached a narrow access point leading toward the weapons development labs. The area was less guarded, but Jake knew that any mistake could trigger alarms. He knelt again, inspecting the door panel. It was secured with a biometric scanner, but a small ventilation grate nearby offered another possibility. Jake grabbed his multi-tool and carefully removed the grate, signaling Ranger to wait. Slipping inside the cramped duct, Jake crawled forward, the metal cool against his skin. The faint hum of machinery grew louder, interspersed with muffled voices and the clink of tools. He peeked through the grate into a dimly lit room filled with sleek weapon prototypes and technicians in lab coats. Jake's eyes scanned the room, noting data terminals and stacks of encrypted hard drives. This was the heart of the base's illicit activity, the place where dangerous technology was being developed beyond any legal oversight. Suddenly, a voice crackled over the lab's intercom. "Security sweep in 5 minutes. All personnel report to designated stations." Jake's jaw tightened. Time was running out. He retreated from the vent, signaling Ranger to move. Back outside, he activated the jammer, targeting the communication relay tower Carter had described. The device emitted a low-frequency pulse, disrupting encrypted signals momentarily. Jake pulled out a concealed transmitter, sending a brief but detailed message to his command. Coordinates, activity report, and the urgent warning of illegal operations. The signal was weak, but enough to pierce the jamming. As the jammer's battery drained, Jake melted back into the forest, Ranger close behind. They rendezvoused with Carter, who showed relief at their safe return. "We have what we need," Jake said quietly. "But this is just the beginning. The base is a fortress, and they won't let this go." Quietly. Carter nodded, his face pale but determined. "Then we keep moving. We expose them." Together, the trio vanished into the night, the weight of their discovery pressing on their shoulders. The hidden base remained a looming threat in the mountains, but Jake, Ranger, and their unlikely ally had taken the first crucial step toward unveiling the dark secrets buried beneath the forest's shadowed canopy. The cold dawn light filtered through the thick canopy, casting long shadows across the rugged terrain as Jake crouched beside a moss-covered boulder, scanning the horizon with a practiced eye. Ranger sat alert at his side, muscles coiled and ready, the dog's keen senses mirroring Jake's own heightened awareness. The night's operation had yielded critical intelligence. The existence of unauthorized weapons development within the hidden mountain base was now confirmed. But the path ahead was fraught with peril. Jake's fingers brushed the compact comm device nestled in his vest pocket. He had managed to send a fragmented transmission to command, but the base's jamming signals remained a formidable obstacle. The encrypted communications pulsing from the relay tower disrupted any meaningful contact, forcing Jake to consider an alternative approach. A covert infiltration during the next shift change. Carter, their reluctant insider, crouched nearby, his face pale but resolute. "I've memorized the new guard rotations," he whispered, voice tight with nervous energy. "The jamming's strongest during the day, but it weakens just enough around midnight. That's when the relay tower's maintenance shifts happen." Jake nodded. "We'll use that window. Ranger, you ready?" The dog responded with a low growl, tail flicking in anticipation. As twilight deepened, the trio moved carefully through the underbrush, retracing their route toward the base's perimeter. The forest was alive with nocturnal sounds, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of an owl. But Jake's focus was razor-sharp. Every footstep was calculated, every breath measured to avoid detection. Approaching the boundary, Jake signaled Carter to stay hidden. "This is where your knowledge counts," he said quietly. "Lead us to the relay tower." Carter nodded and slipped ahead, moving with surprising stealth despite his lack of field experience. The path wound upward, skirting rocky outcrops and tangled roots until they reached a clearing dominated by the tall, skeletal structure of the relay tower. Antennas stretched skyward, their metal frames humming faintly with transmitted signals. Jake crouched behind a nearby boulder, pulling out a small electronic device from his pack, a signal interceptor designed to capture and decipher encrypted transmissions. He calibrated the device carefully, aware that any misstep could trigger alarms. Ranger's ears twitched as the dog scanned the area, alert to the faintest movements. Suddenly, footsteps approached. The night shift maintenance crew arriving earlier than expected. Jake pressed himself flat against the rock, heart pounding, as two guards passed within yards, oblivious to the hidden observers. Once the guards disappeared, Jake set the interceptor near the base of the tower and activated it. The device emitted a low hum, syncing with the relay's frequency. Static crackled through the earpiece as encrypted transmissions began to flow, snippets of coded language and data packets. Hours stretched as Jake painstakingly analyzed the signals, his fingers dancing over the device's interface to isolate patterns and decode fragments of the base's communications. The intercepted data revealed references to weapon prototypes, shipment schedules, and orders from a shadowy command structure. The picture was growing clearer, but the jamming remained a persistent thorn. Suddenly, the device crackled with interference, the signal wavering. Jake glanced toward the dense tree line, where a faint glow betrayed the arrival of reinforcements. The base was on heightened alert. "Time's up," Jake whispered, signaling Carter and Ranger. He quickly deactivated the interceptor, stowing it safely. "We need to move." They slipped back into the shadows, retracing their path through the forest. But as they navigated the rocky terrain, a sudden burst of static erupted from Jake's wrist comm, followed by a distorted voice. "This is command. Extraction delayed. Hold position and continue intel gathering." The message was brief but clear. External support was compromised, leaving Jake to operate independently. The weight of isolation pressed down, but he steeled himself. Failure was not an option. Over the next days, Jake devised a plan for a nighttime infiltration of the weapons labs, relying on Ranger's unparalleled senses to navigate security and Carter's insider knowledge to bypass internal protocols. The mission demanded precision, stealth, and the ability to adapt under pressure. As night fell once more, Jake prepared his gear. Suppressed weapons, lockpicking tools, a compact jammer, and encrypted communication devices. Ranger received a reassuring pat, his steady presence a balm against the encroaching tension. They approached the base under the cloak of darkness, slipping past patrols and cameras with practiced ease. The gate, vulnerable during the shift change, opened silently under Jake's skilled hands. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of machinery and chemicals, the faint hum of activity, a constant reminder of the stakes. Navigating the labyrinthine corridors, Jake relied on Carter's whispered directions and Ranger's keen instincts. They reached the labs, where prototypes gleamed under sterile lights and scientists worked under duress. Jake quickly gathered photographic evidence and scanned terminal data, each piece of intelligence a potential key to dismantling the rogue operation. But just as they prepared to exfiltrate, alarms blared. An unexpected security sweep triggered. Guards flooded the corridors, weapons drawn and voices sharp. Jake's training surged forth. With Ranger leading, they slipped through hidden passages and maintenance shafts, evading capture by mere inches. Carter faltered briefly, but was steadied by Jake's firm grip and Ranger's reassuring presence. Bursting into the forest under the moonlit sky, they sprinted toward a prearranged extraction point. The distant howl of search dogs and shouted commands echoed behind them, but the trio pressed on, fueled by adrenaline and determination. Reaching a concealed ridge, Jake activated a signal flare, piercing the night with a red burst. Moments later, a faint hum of rotors approached. Backup sent at last, a lifeline in the darkness. As the helicopter touched down, Jake glanced back toward the looming base. The rogue installation still stood, its secrets partially unveiled, but its threat far from over. Yet, in that moment, with Ranger at his side and Carter safe, Jake felt the resolve to continue the fight, to expose the shadows lurking beneath the mountains and bring justice to light. The forest was alive with tension as Jake Turner crouched low beneath the skeletal branches of a wind-bent pine, his breath steady but shallow. Rangers sat close by, muscles taut, eyes flicking through the shadows with an almost preternatural alertness. The rogue military base had gone on high alert following their recent infiltration, and the hunt was on. The once hidden threat had now turned into a deadly game of cat and mouse, with Jake and his team as the prey. Jake's mind raced through escape routes, recalling every twist and turn of the forest trails. The dense undergrowth provided some cover, but the relentless pursuit by armed operatives was a constant pressure. The guards had deployed search dogs, their howls slicing through the night air, a chilling reminder of the narrowing distance between hunter and hunted. Suddenly, a rustle to their left triggered a low growl from Ranger. Jake raised a hand to signal silence, eyes narrowing as two figures emerged from the shadows, rifles raised and flashlights cutting swaths through the dark. Without hesitation, Jake ducked behind a fallen log, pulling Ranger with him. The dogs barked furiously, the guards' voices sharp and commanding. "We lost them near the ridge," one shouted. "Sweep the area." Jake's heart pounded, but his training took over. He whispered to Ranger, "Move." The dog melted into the underbrush with silent grace, nose to the ground, weaving through the trees. Jake followed, moving swiftly yet cautiously, aware that a single misstep could mean capture or worse. The mountainous terrain worked both for and against them. The rocky outcrops offered brief refuge, but the uneven ground slowed their progress. Jake's ankle twisted on a hidden root, sending a jolt of pain up his leg. He clenched his teeth, refusing to falter. Ranger circled back, pressing close as if sensing his handler's strain. As they navigated a narrow ridge, Jake spotted a faint flicker of light ahead, a small campfire surrounded by a few low tents. It was a temporary outpost, perhaps a forward base for the pursuers. They couldn't risk being spotted. Jake tapped Carter's shoulder, motioning to take a different path through a dense thicket. Carter nodded, visibly shaken but determined. "They're closing in faster than expected," he whispered. "We need to split up. It's our best chance." Jake hesitated, weighing the risks. Splitting up meant vulnerability, but staying together increased the chance of being cornered. He looked into Carter's eyes, saw the resolve and fear mirrored there, and made the call. "All right. Carter, you head east toward the river. Ranger and I will circle west and meet at the old logging road in 2 hours. Move fast and stay hidden." Carter swallowed hard and disappeared into the shadows. Jake exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of responsibility settle more heavily than ever. The forest closed in as Jake and Ranger pressed westward, the dog's ears swiveling to catch every sound. The distant shouts of pursuers echoed faintly, punctuated by the baying of dogs. Jake's muscles ached, but his focus was unbreakable. Ranger led through a maze of fallen trees and rocky crevices, the dog's instincts guiding them away from the search parties. Suddenly, Jake froze. Ahead, a narrow ravine cut through the landscape, its sides steep and treacherous. The only way across was a rickety wooden bridge, swaying precariously in the night breeze. He scanned the area, no guards in sight, but the bridge's condition was uncertain. "Ranger, wait," Jake murmured, testing the first plank with his boot. It groaned ominously. Trusting the dog's sure-footedness, Jake moved cautiously, each step deliberate. Midway across, the bridge creaked loudly, a sharp snap echoing as one plank gave way beneath his weight. Jake's heart leapt. Instinctively, Ranger lunged forward, gripping Jake's jacket with his teeth, steadying him. Jake scrambled the rest of the way across, adrenaline surging through his veins. Breathing hard, he looked back at the broken bridge, knowing the pursuers would find that obstacle frustrating, but not impassable. Time was running out. Once across, Jake and Ranger plunged into thick underbrush, moving swiftly yet silently. The moon cast a silver glow, illuminating patches of the forest floor. Jake's mind flashed back to the intelligence gathered, the secret weapons, the encrypted communications, the insider Carter's warnings. The stakes had never been higher. As they neared the logging road, a faint noise caught Jake's attention. A a mechanical whirring from above. He looked up to see a spotlight sweeping the treetops, mounted on a drone dispatched to scour the area. Jake's pulse quickened. He grabbed a flare from his pack, hesitating only a moment before igniting it. The red flare arced through the air, signaling their location to any friendly forces nearby. The drone's light veered sharply toward the glow, but a sharp bark from Ranger sent it veering off course momentarily. "Good boy," Jake whispered, pressing himself against a tree as the drone circled away. Minutes later, headlights appeared along the logging road, backup arriving just in time. Jake allowed himself a brief moment of relief as a military jeep pulled up, soldiers jumping out to secure the perimeter. "Turner," a voice called out. Jake rose, nodding to the team leader. "We've got the intel. The base is more dangerous than we thought. Weapons development is active, and they're preparing for something big." The leader's expression hardened. "We'll need every piece of evidence you gathered. Let's move before they regroup." Jake glanced back toward the dark forest, where shadows still held untold threats. Ranger barked softly, tail wagging despite the exhaustion. As they loaded into the jeep, Jake felt a surge of determination. The base might be hunting them now, but they had exposed its secrets. Survival was no longer just about escape. It was about bringing the hidden dangers to light, no matter the cost. Jake Turner sat silently in the dimly lit safe house, the worn walls closing in like the weight of the secret he now bore. Ranger lay curled at his feet, ears twitching at every distant sound, ever vigilant. Outside, the forest stood quiet beneath a heavy blanket of fog, as if holding its breath alongside them. The past days had been a relentless blur of evasion and survival, but the mission had taken an unexpected turn. Earlier that evening, after narrowly escaping the manhunt through the rugged mountain terrain, Jake had been approached by a figure who had slipped through the shadows with a caution born of desperation. It was a man Jake hadn't anticipated. Sergeant Mark Ellis, a weapons technician assigned to the clandestine base, whose loyalty had frayed under the weight of the dark deeds unfolding within the compound's walls. Ellis's eyes were haunted, his voice low and urgent as he revealed truths that shattered Jake's assumptions. "I've seen things you wouldn't believe," Ellis had confessed, his hands trembling. "Experimental weapons, biological agents, stuff that's beyond any legal sanction. The chain of command's been compromised. Higher-ups, people you'd never expect, are pulling strings behind the scenes." Jake had studied Ellis carefully, weighing the risk of trusting a man so deeply embedded within the enemy's ranks. But the technician's knowledge was invaluable, a key to unraveling the operation's inner workings. Ellis had agreed to help, driven by a fierce resolve to expose the corruption that threatened to spiral out of control. Now, in the quiet of the safe house, Jake reviewed the source information Ellis had provided, a cache of encrypted files, schematics of weapon prototypes, and detailed logs of the base's leadership meetings. The depth of the conspiracy was staggering. Pierce Vanderamp, a high-ranking official with ties to powerful military contractors, was named repeatedly. His involvement suggested the operation was not just rogue, but part of a larger scheme fueled by greed and ambition. Ranger's soft whine pulled Jake from his thoughts. The dog's gaze met his, a silent reminder of the stakes at hand. "We're not alone in this, buddy," Jake whispered, "and we need to be smart about it." Ellis had warned that the base's security protocols had intensified, with electronic surveillance now monitoring even the most remote communication channels. Any attempt to reach out for external help risked immediate detection. The trio was isolated, relying on cunning and stealth to stay one step ahead. Jake summoned Carter, their insider who had been crucial in navigating the compound's layout. Carter arrived cautiously, his eyes flicking nervously toward the windows. The three men huddled over a rugged table, spreading out maps and devices as they plotted their next move. "We can't just sit here waiting," Jake said firmly. "Ellis, you said there's a way to access the mainframe remotely?" Ellis nodded, tapping a tablet that displayed a complex network schematic. "There's a back door, an override code embedded in the system for emergencies. I can get us in, but it's risky. Once inside, we can extract proof of the illegal activities and send it to trusted contacts outside the base." Carter leaned in, voice hushed. "But that means infiltrating deeper into the network. They've increased patrols around the data center, and the encryption protocols are tighter than ever." Jake's jaw clenched. "We don't have a choice. Exposure is our only weapon now." Over the next several hours, Ellis guided Jake and Carter through the digital labyrinth. Using a combination of stolen credentials and his own technical expertise, Ellis bypassed multiple layers of security. Meanwhile, Ranger lay alert nearby, ears swiveling at every sound outside. Suddenly, the tablet flickered. A warning flashed in red. "Firewall breach detected," Ellis muttered, fingers flying over the screen. "They're tracing us." Jake's heart hammered, but his face remained calm. "Cover me," he ordered Carter, who swiftly pulled up surveillance feeds and began looping camera footage to mask their intrusion. The tension in the room was electric as Ellis worked to extract the files, each second stretching into an eternity. Outside, the distant howl of approaching vehicles signaled that they had been compromised. "Got it!" Ellis exclaimed, downloading the final batch of data. "We need to move, now." Jake grabbed the encrypted drives, sliding them into a secure pouch. "Ranger, on me." The dog rose instantly, tail stiff with anticipation. The three men slipped into the night, navigating a back exit known only to a few. The fog thickened, wrapping around them like a shroud as they raced toward a secondary safe point. But the sound of engines roared closer, their pursuers closing in fast. Gunfire erupted in the distance, sharp and urgent. Jake propelled himself forward, Ranger bounding beside him, senses razor-sharp. Carter stumbled, a shadowy figure lunging from the trees. Jake caught him, pulling him clear just as a bullet tore through the air where Carter's head had been moments before. They pressed on, heartbeats pounding in unison with the rapid rhythm of their flight. The base's corruption was far-reaching and dangerous, but the alliance forged in these desperate moments was their greatest strength. As they reached the edge of a cliff overlooking the valley below, Jake paused, breath ragged but resolve unbroken. "We have the evidence," he said, voice low but fierce. "Now it's time to bring the truth into the light." Ranger nuzzled his hand, a steadfast companion in the darkness. Together, they vanished into the night, shadows among shadows, ready to challenge the corrupt forces that had hidden in plain sight for too long. The early morning mist clung to the trees as Jake Turner, Carter, and Ellis navigated the rugged path leading away from the mountain's shadow. Their breaths came in sharp clouds, the weight of the encrypted drive secured tightly in Jake's pack, a constant reminder of the stakes they carried. Behind them, the rogue base lingered like a dark wound beneath the forest canopy, a secret poised to unravel. In the distance, the faint hum of helicopters and ground vehicles signaled the arrival of the coordinated response Jake had long hoped for. The military command, now fully briefed with the damning evidence extracted from the base's mainframe, had launched a rapid deployment to dismantle the hidden facility. The operation was swift and surgical, designed to minimize collateral damage and bring the corrupt actors to justice. Jake scanned the horizon as the sound of rotor blades drew nearer. The extraction team appeared through the fog, their black uniforms blending into the dawn's muted light. Soldiers moved with precision, securing the perimeter and providing medical aid to those caught in the crossfire. As Jake approached the command vehicle, he handed over the encrypted drives to a stern-faced intelligence officer. "This contains everything," Jake said, voice steady despite exhaustion. "Weapon schematics, communication logs, names of key operatives, including those higher up in the chain." The officer nodded grimly. "This will bring down the whole network. You did good, Turner." But Jake's focus remained sharp. The base was dismantled, but the repercussions would ripple far beyond these mountains. The public exposure of the rogue operation threatened powerful interests, and Jake knew the fight was far from over. Meanwhile, Carter and Ellis were escorted to secure debriefing areas, their testimonies critical to the unfolding investigation. Jake watched as they disappeared into the command center, the burden of their shared ordeal etched into their faces. Later, in a quiet corner of the base camp, Jake knelt beside Ranger, running a hand through the dog's fur. The bond between them had only deepened through the trials, the silent understanding of comrades who had faced darkness together. A messenger approached, handing Jake a sealed envelope. Inside was a confidential briefing. The scandal was reaching the highest echelons of power. Pierce Vanderamp's name was now public, implicated in bribery and corruption connected to the base's illicit activities. Jake's jaw tightened. Justice was beginning, but the road ahead would be treacherous. The media had already caught wind of the raid, and journalists swarmed nearby, eager for information. Among them was Rebecca Thorne, an investigative reporter known for her relentless pursuit of truth. She had secured an exclusive interview with Jake, aiming to shed light on the shadows the military's official channels sought to obscure. Jake agreed, recognizing the power of transparency. His words echoed through news outlets, exposing the system of corruption and the courage it took to confront it. Days later, as the dust settled, Jake received a call from his commanding officer. Commendations were in order, but the mission had changed him. The bond with Ranger, the alliance with Carter and Ellis, and the unyielding fight against hidden threats had reshaped his purpose. On a quiet evening, Jake stood at the edge of the mountain range, Ranger at his side, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The scars of the past mission were invisible, yet profound, a reminder that vigilance was eternal. The hidden base was no more, but its legacy lingered, a testament to what could be uncovered when courage met conviction. Together, Jake and Ranger turned away from the fading light, ready to face whatever shadows awaited beyond the peaks. The sun had barely risen over the rugged peaks when Jake Turner found himself back at base camp, the crisp mountain air filling his lungs with a mix of relief and resolve. The mission to dismantle the rogue base had concluded successfully, but as Jake sat beneath a towering pine, the weight of what lay ahead settled heavily on his shoulders. Ranger lay nearby, paws stretched out, occasionally lifting his head to scan the surroundings. The dog's steady presence was a balm after the chaos and danger they had endured together. Jake reached down, running a hand through Ranger's thick fur, feeling the familiar warmth that grounded him amidst uncertainty. Jake had been formally commended for his bravery and strategic acumen. The medals and praise, however, felt secondary to the deeper impact of the mission. The exposure of the clandestine weapons program had sparked a cascade of investigations and reforms within the military ranks, an upheaval that promised to root out corruption but also stirred resistance from those invested in the old order. In the command tent, Jake had briefed senior officials on the intel gathered with the help of Carter and Ellis, whose testimonies had been instrumental in unraveling the full scope of the operation. The evidence had led to arrests and the dismantling of illicit networks that stretched far beyond the mountain base. Outside, news crews buzzed with the story, their cameras capturing the faces of those who had risked everything to bring the truth to light. Among them was Rebecca Thorne, the investigative journalist whose fearless reporting had amplified the impact of Jake's discovery. Her articles exposed the tangled web of bribery and deception linked to Pierce Vanderamp, igniting public outrage and demanding accountability. But for Jake, the mission's success was intertwined with personal reflection. He often found himself wandering the trails near base camp, the solitude offering space to process the journey. The bond with Ranger had deepened beyond service and duty. It was a partnership forged in adversity, a silent understanding that transcended words. One afternoon, as Jake navigated a narrow ridge, he encountered Carter and Ellis sharing a quiet moment by a stream. Their faces bore the marks of stress and uncertainty, but also a shared sense of purpose. Carter glanced up, nodding in greeting. "We're trying to figure out what comes next," he said. "The fallout's just beginning." Ellis added, "The reforms will take time, and the people behind this won't go down without a fight." Jake nodded solemnly. "We've started something important. It's not over, but we've shifted the balance." As the weeks passed, Jake remained engaged with the ongoing investigations, offering insight and support where needed. Yet, he also began contemplating his future beyond the military, a path shaped by the lessons learned and the resilience forged in the mountains. In quiet moments, he reflected on the unseen dangers that lurk beneath the surface. The hidden bases, the corrupt officials, the silent battles fought away from public view. The mission had taught him the value of vigilance, integrity, and the courage to stand against darkness. Standing once more at the edge of the forest, Jake looked toward the horizon where the sky met the peaks. Beside him, Ranger shifted, alert and ready. Together, they had faced shadows and emerged stronger, their journey a testament to loyalty and perseverance. The mountains whispered promises of new challenges, but Jake felt ready, grounded by experience, driven by purpose, and connected by the unbreakable bond with his canine partner. As the sun climbed higher, casting golden light across the landscape, Jake and Ranger turned away from the past and stepped forward into the uncertain dawn, prepared to protect and serve wherever the path might lead. The crisp mountain air filled Jake Turner's lungs as he stood once again on the ridge overlooking the vast expanse of wilderness below. The peaks stretched endlessly, their jagged silhouettes etched against the slowly brightening sky. Beside him, Ranger sat attentively, eyes fixed on the horizon, ears twitching at the whisper of the wind through the pines. This was their place, a refuge and a battlefield, a landscape that had tested their limits and forged their unbreakable bond. The mission to expose the clandestine base had left scars, both visible and unseen. Yet here, amidst the quiet majesty of the mountains, Jake found a moment of peace. He traced the familiar contours of the terrain, recalling every step, every danger, every victory. The rugged trails they had navigated were more than just paths through the forest. They were the threads of a story woven with trust, resilience, and unwavering vigilance. Ranger shifted, rising to his feet and nudging Jake's hand with his muzzle. The dog's loyalty was a constant reminder that no challenge was faced alone. Their partnership had transcended the demands of duty. It was a silent language of understanding forged in the crucible of shared hardship. Jake's gaze softened as he looked down at his companion. "We've come a long way, partner," he murmured. "And there's still more to do." The shadows that had once lurked beneath the surface of these mountains had been brought into the light. The rogue base was dismantled, its secrets exposed, and its architects held accountable. The ripple effects of their actions had sparked investigations that reached far beyond the forest's edge, challenging corruption and demanding justice. Yet Jake knew the fight was ongoing. The world was vast, and threats often hid in plain sight. Vigilance was a lifelong commitment, a watchfulness that never waned. As the first rays of sunlight kissed the treetops, Jake allowed himself a moment to reflect, not just on the mission's success, but on the journey that had shaped him. The alliances formed, the sacrifices made, and the courage summoned in the face of danger were threads woven into the fabric of his life. He thought of Carter and Ellis, whose bravery had been instrumental in unraveling the conspiracy. Their bond, forged in adversity, was a testament to the power of trust and the strength found in unlikely allies. Turning back to the horizon, Jake felt a renewed sense of purpose. The mountains had tested them, but they had also reminded him of the enduring values that guided his path: integrity, resilience, and the readiness to stand against darkness wherever it might arise. With a final glance at the valley below, Jake adjusted his pack and signaled to Ranger. Together, they began their descent, their footsteps light but determined. The forest embraced them once more, a living testament to the challenges overcome and the vigilance that remained. In the quiet rhythm of their journey, Jake understood that their story was far from over. The mountains would always hold secrets, and the shadows would always shift. But with Ranger by his side and unwavering resolve in his heart, he was ready to face whatever lay ahead. Their silhouettes melded into the morning light as they moved forward. Guardians of the unseen, champions of justice, and partners bound by loyalty. The path was uncertain, but their purpose was clear. The mountains whispered their ancient song, and Jake Turner answered with steady steps and a steadfast heart. Forever watchful, forever ready.